Now, to be such a guide requires great discipline and training. Before the event just mentioned, for example, I had spent many lifetimes acting as a guide under the tutorship of another in my daily sleep states. It is possible, for example, to lose yourself momentarily in the hallucinations that are being formed, and in such cases another teacher must bail you out. Delicate probing of the psychological processes is necessary, and the variety of hallucinations in which you may become involved is endless. You may, for example, take the form of an individual's dearly beloved dead pet. All of these hallucinatory activities take place usually some short time immediately following death. Some individuals are fully aware of their circumstances, however, because of previous training and development, and they are ready after arrest if they desire to progress to other stages. They may, for example, become aware of their own reincarnational selves, recognizing quite readily personalities they knew in other lives, if those personalities are not otherwise engaged. They may deliberately now hallucinate, or they may relive certain portions of past lives if they choose. Then there is a period of self-examination, a rendering of accounts, so to speak, in which they are able to view their entire performance, their abilities and weak points, and decide whether or not they will return to physical existence. Any given individual may experience any of these stages, you see. Except for the self-examination, many may be sidestepped entirely. Since the emotions are so important, it is of great benefit if friends are waiting for you. In many instances, however, these friends have progressed to other stages of activity, and often a guide will take the guise of a friend for a while, so that you will feel more confident. Of course, it is only because most people believe that you cannot leave your body that you do not consciously have out-of-body experiences with any frequency, generally speaking, in your lifetimes. Such experiences would acquaint you far better than words with some understanding of the conditions that will be encountered. Remember that in one way, your physical existence is the result of mass hallucination. Vast gulfs exist between one man's reality and another's. After death, experience has as much organization, highly intricate and involved, as you know now. You have your private hallucinations now, only you do not realize what they are. Such hallucinations, as I have been speaking of, intense symbolic encounters, can also occur in your sleep states, when the personality is at a time of great change, or when opposing ideas must be unified, or if one must give way to another. These are highly charged, significant psychological and psychic events, whether they happen before or after death. Occurring in the dream state, they can change the course of a civilization. After death, an individual may visualize his immediately previous physical life as an animal with which he must come to terms, and such a battle or encounter has far-reaching consequences, for the man must come to terms with all portions of himself. In this case, whether the hallucination ends with him riding the animal, making friends with it, domesticating it, killing it, or being killed by it, each alternative is carefully weighed, and the results will have much to do with his future development. This life symbolization may be adopted by those who gave little thought to self-examination during their lifetime. It is a part of the self-examination process, therefore, in which an individual forms his life into an image and then deals with it. Such a method is not used by all. Sometimes a series of such episodes are necessary. Now, one of Rupert's students wondered whether or not there was any kind of organization in the immediate after-death experiences. Since this is a question that will come into many minds, I will deal with it here. First of all, it should be obvious from what I have said so far that there is no one after-death reality, but that each experience is different. Generally speaking, however, there are dimensions into which these individual experiences will fall. For example, there is an initial stage for those who are still focused strongly in physical reality, and for those who need a period of recuperation and rest. On this level, there will be hospitals and rest homes. The patients do not yet realize that there is nothing wrong with them at all. In some cases, the idea of illness is so strong that they have built their earthly years about this psychological center. They project ill conditions upon the new body as they did upon the old one. They are given various kinds of treatments of a psychic nature, and told that the condition of that body is being brought about by the nature of their own beliefs. Now, many individuals do not need to pass through this particular period. It goes without saying that the hospitals and training centers are not physical in your terms. They are often, in fact, maintained en masse by the guides who carry out the necessary plans. Now, you may call this mass hallucination, if you will. Fact is that to those encountering that reality, the events are quite real. There are also training centers. In these, the nature of reality is explained in accordance with an individual's ability to understand and perceive it. The familiar parables for some will still be used, at least initially, and then these individuals will gradually be weaned away from them. In these centers, there are certain classes in which instruction is given for the benefit of those who chose to return to the physical environment. They are taught, in other words, the methods that allow them to translate emotion and thought into physical actuality. There is no time lag, as there must be in the three-dimensional system, between the initiation of such thoughts and their materialization. All of this occurs more or less at one level, though you must understand that I am simplifying the issues here to some extent. For example, some individuals do not undergo any such periods, but because of development and progress during their past lives, they are ready to begin more ambitious programs. Now, I have spoken of such development earlier. Some of my readers, not being perhaps aware of any psychic ability of their own, might think then that they are in for a long and protracted period of after-death training. Let me hasten to tell you that all such ability is not necessarily conscious, and that much of it takes place during the sleep state when you are simply not aware of it. You may, after death, utterly refuse to believe that you are dead, and continue to focus your emotional energy toward those you have known in life. If you have been obsessed with a particular project, for example, you may try to complete it. There are always guides to help you understand your situation, but you may be so engrossed that you pay them no heed. I will cover the subject of ghosts separately, rather than in this chapter. Suffice it to say that large fields of emotional focus toward physical reality can hold you back from further development. When consciousness leaves the body and is away for it for some time, then the connection is, of course, broken. In out-of-body states, the connection still holds. Now, it is possible for an individual who has died to completely misinterpret the experience and attempt to re-enter the corpse. This can happen when the personality identified himself almost exclusively with the physical image. It is not common, but nevertheless, under various circumstances, such individuals will attempt to reactivate the physical mechanism, becoming more panic-stricken when they discover the body's condition. Some, for example, have wept over the corpse long after the mourners have left, not realizing that they themselves are completely whole, where, for example, the body may have been ill or the organs beyond repair. They are like a dog worrying a bone. Those who have not identified their consciousness with the body completely find it much easier to leave it. Those who have hated the body find, strangely enough, that immediately after death they are quite drawn to it. All of these circumstances then may or may not occur according to the individual involved. However, after leaving the physical body, you will immediately find yourself in another. This is the same kind of form in which you travel in out-of-body projections, and again, let me remind my readers that each of them leaves the body for some time each night during sleep. This form will seem physical. It will not be seen by those still in the physical body, however, generally speaking. It can do anything that you do now in your dreams. Therefore, it flies, goes through solid objects, and is moved directly by your will, taking you, say, from one location to another as you may think of these locations. If you wonder what Aunt Sally is doing, say, in Poughkeepsie, New York, then you will find yourself there. However, you cannot, as a rule, manipulate physical objects. You cannot pick up a lamp or throw a dish. This body is yours instantly, but is not the only form that you will have. For that matter, this image is not a new one. It is interwound with your physical body now, but you do not perceive it. Following death, it will be the only body you are aware of for some time. Much later, and on many levels, you will finally learn to take many forms as you choose, consciously. In one manner of speaking, you do this now, you see, translating your psychological experience, your thoughts and emotions, quite literally but unconsciously into physical objects. You may find that when you imagine yourself as a child, after death, then you suddenly have the form of a child that you were. For a certain period of time, therefore, you can manipulate this form so that it takes any appearance that it had when it was connected with your physical form in the immediately previous physical life. You may die at 80 and after death think of the youth and vitality that you had at 20, and find then that your form changes to correspond with the inner image. Most individuals after death choose a more mature image that usually corresponds to the peak physical abilities, regardless of the age when the physical peak was reached. Others choose instead to take the form they had at a particular point when the greatest mental or emotional heights were achieved, regardless of the beauty or age that characterized the form. You will feel comfortable with the form that you choose, therefore, and you will usually use it when you want to communicate with others you have known, though for such communications with the living, you may instead adopt the form you had when you were known to the individuals you want to contact. These after-death environments do not exist necessarily on other planets. They do not take up space, so the question, where does all this happen, is meaningless in basic terms. It is the result of your own misinterpretations of the nature of reality. There is no one place, therefore, no specific location. These environments exist unperceived by you amid the physical world that you know. Your physical mechanisms simply do not allow you to tune into their ranges. You react to a highly specific but limited field. As I mentioned earlier, other realities coexist with your own at death, for example. You simply divest yourself of physical paraphernalia, tune into different fields, and react to other sets of assumptions. From this other viewpoint, you can to some extent perceive physical reality. However, there are energy fields that do separate them. Your entire concept of space is so distorted that any true explanation is highly difficult. As your perceptive mechanisms insist that objects are solid, for example, so they insist that such a thing as space exists. Now, what your senses tell you about the nature of matter is entirely erroneous, and what they tell you about space is equally wrong. Wrong in terms of basic reality, but quite in keeping, of course, with three-dimensional concepts. In out-of-body experiences from the living state, many of the problems are encountered in terms of space that will be met after death, and in such episodes, therefore, the true nature of time and space becomes more apparent. After death, it does not take time to go through space, for example. Space does not exist in terms of distance. This is illusion. There are barriers, but they are mental or psychic barriers. For example, there are intensities of experience that are interpreted in your reality as distance in miles. After death, you may find yourself in a training center. Now, theoretically, this center could be in the middle of your present living room in physical space, but the distance between you and the members of your family still living, sitting perhaps, thinking of you or reading a paper, would have nothing to do with space as you know it. You would be more separated from them than if you were, say, on the moon. You could perhaps change your own focus of attention away from the center and theoretically see the room and its inhabitants, and yet still this distance that has nothing to do with miles would be between you.